stuff together. No more Fritos till I'm done.
They made it too.
No more Fritos till I'm done. Okay. So we're going to talk about, we're going to do, I'm going to do a reading, or I'm going to read some stuff, and then we're going to open up the floor for like discussion. And basically we had decided, for those watching this video, because it will be a video, that we had decided, I think once or twice a week, we're going to try and do a video on a certain topic. And tonight is going to be on shame culture versus guilt culture. Alyssa, mute yourself. I know it's Alyssa because she's getting in her car. Okay. So, living in small, highly interdependent bands, our ancestors faced frequent life-threatening reversals, and they counted on their fellow band members to value them enough during bad times to pull them through. So being devalued by others, deemed unworthy of help, was literally a threat to their survival. Therefore, when considering how to act, it was critical to weigh the direct payoff of a potential action, like how much will I benefit by stealing this food, against its social cost, which would be how much will others devalue me if I steal the food, and how likely is it that they will find out. That becomes critical. In a world without soup kitchens, police, hospitals, or insurance, our ancestors needed to consider how much future help they would lose if they took various actions that others disapprove of, but that would be rewarding in other ways. So again, it's talking about frith. What if I do this? Is it going to throw us out of frith in the community? If that's the case, we're going to be ousted. So shame, like pain, evolved as a defense. The function of pain is to prevent us from damaging our own tissue. That's why we developed a sense of pain. You know, if I touch something hot, I go, shit, that hurts. I'm probably not going to touch that again unless I'm completely an idiot. So the function of shame is to prevent us from damaging our social relationships or to motivate us to repair them if we do. As a neural system, and it is in a neural system. It's like a pathway that we've developed over our evolution. Shame inclines you to factor in others' regard alongside private benefits. So the act associated with the highest total payoff for the whole is selected. This has been something that evolved as we evolved. That sense of we need to take care of the whole. A key part of this argument is that this neurally based motivational system is part of our species biology. The flip side of shame would be honor and pride. You know, that's why we call them a shame honor culture, honor shame. It's both sides of it. People evolved over time. We have evolved to have a selfish streak, but they also needed a contrary pull towards acts that would make others value them in a world, again, without soup kitchens, police, hospital, insurance. So we had to, our species evolved this feeling of pride. It's an internal reward that draws us towards such acts. Anthropologist Ruth Benedict described, I just lost myself. Described the distinction between a guilt culture and a shame culture. In a guilt culture, you know you are good or bad by what your conscience feels. In a shame culture, you know you are good or bad by what your community says about you, by whether it honors you or excludes you. In a guilt culture, people sometimes feel they do bad things. In a shame culture, social exclusion makes people feel they are bad. Guilt and shame are rather two different negative emotions, which are often confused. Both emotions keep people on the straight and narrow, avoiding socially disapproved thoughts and behaviors. And in both cases, people feel bad about themselves, but that's where the similarity ends. A prominent feature of guilt societies is the provision of a sanctioned release from guilt for certain behaviors, like, you know, sex is bad unless you're married, or, you know, stealing is bad unless you're a bank, that kind of thing. But permits it conditionally in the context of things. There's a clear opportunity in such cases for authority figures to derive power, monetary and or other advantages, etc., etc., by manipulating the conditions of guilt and the forgiveness of guilt. Shame, like all emotions, exists because it conferred a meaningful survival advantage for our ancestors. Shame is literally, like I said, it is a biological function. It developed. Guilt did not. Guilt came from outside sources. Um, it's shame, was conferred a meaningful survival advantage for our ancestors. It is a universal experience. Every human walking has this in them, this built in them. The body language associated with shame, inverted shoulders, averted eyes, pursed lips, bowed head, and so on, occurs across every culture. Even blind people exhibit the same body language, indicating it is innate, INNATE, not learned. We would not waste our time and energy on shame if it wasn't necessary for survival. Shame enforces social norms. For our ancestors, the ability to maintain social cohesion was a matter of life or death. Take the almost ubiquitous social rule that states stealing is wrong. If a person is caught stealing, they are likely to feel some degree of shame. While this behavior may not threaten anyone's survival today, in the past, it could have been a sign that a group's ability to cooperate was in jeopardy. And living in small groups in a harsh environment meant full cooperation was essential. So through the lens of evolutionary biology, shame evolved to encourage adherence to beneficial social norms. And this is backed up by the fact that shame is more prevalent in collectivist societies like tribal communities where people spend little to no time alone than it is in individualistic societies where people live more isolated lives, like many in the West have come to be. And the link of a guilt culture with Christianity is not accidental at all. Guilt has most power when you have a sense of a divine eye who sees what your peers might not. God sees everything. And oh my Lord, a soul that can be stained without any physical sign of defilement, like that, he knows, and my soul is black. No one may know it, but God knows, and I'm done. In that sense, guilt is kind of an internalization of shame. We don't have that in heathenry. We don't have this overall God that's going. We don't. Our deeds, what we do, wrong or right, we deal with now, and that's what a shame culture is. We deal with it now. The gods honestly really don't give a crap about your day-to-day stuff like that. I mean, it's not going to stop you from going to the afterlife. But it's few exceptions, very few exceptions. You deal with your issues now that you do, your wrongs and your deeds now, good and bad. There are 5 main aspects of a shame culture. I want to say like unwritten rules. I'm going to go over these and then we'll open up for discussion. So 1, family defines everything. In a collectivist society, identity is defined by the group you belong to. And the collectivist, I mean like a tribal society, like our ancestors and like most of us tend to be leaning towards. Identity is defined by the group you belong to. When 2 people meet, one of the first items of conversation is figuring out which family or clan or village the person's from. And since honor is a shared commodity, what one person does brings honor or shame upon the entire community. And that's what frith is. Children are taught from an early age how to bring honor to the family, and people are expected to be loyal to their community, even at personal cost. In Western cultures, family is much more of a voluntary association. At the age of 18 or so, young adults are encouraged to venture out from home to go find themselves or establish their own lives. We don't grow up in families like our ancestors did, and I do think that's a shame. Sometimes it's probably a good thing. But number 2, social capital fixes anything. In an honor-shame cultures, life is a constant quest to develop and maintain an intricate network of relationships that is social capital. The most important asset any person has is his or her reputation. If other people respect and know you, then you can accomplish just about anything. Since problems are solved via relationships, a strong social network is essential for success in life. You accrue social capital by giving gifts, helping people, and sharing meals. Then you can cash it in if you need help with a problem. That's called reciprocity. In Western cultures, solving a problem through relationships is viewed as being corrupt and unfair. We use financial capital to buy our goods and services, for which the price is clearly listed and the same for everyone. The third rule would be aggression restores honor. When honor is life's most important commodity, then any insult to one's honor must be vigorously defended. Most honor shame cultures are antagonistic, which means they compete for their honor. When a woman is shamed, her male relatives appear weak for failing to protect her. And the cultural response in many places is to defend the family's name with aggression, either against her or against the aggressor. For Westerners, bad behavior is viewed as a crime against the state, not a personal offense or an honor insult. And those who respond to dishonor with violence are seen as immature bullies. 4, words define status. Honor shame cultures often have clearly prescribed greetings for people of various social standing. For example, the greeting you say to an elder is different from what you would say to a younger person. Words are tools for defining the social hierarchy. It's also a matter of respect. Since the purpose of language is to communicate honor and maintain relational harmony, the concepts of honesty and truth look very different. In Western cultures, words communicate information and facts. Cut to the chase, don't beat around the bush, are morally laden imperatives. Indirect communication that prioritizes harmony and status come across as being deceptive, dishonest, or manipulative. Being respectful is, I want to say looked down upon, but it can be, oh, you're just being fake. No, I'm being respectful. There's a difference. And the fifth one would be food conveys honor. And that is so big if you're from Appalachia. In honor shame cultures, the people you eat with define both your community and identity. A friend in Central Asia asked once, do Americans really eat lunch alone in a cubicle or driving in their car like in the movies? Breaking bread together imparts honor, so eating alone is unthinkable. This is why hospitality and meals are so significant in Muslim cultures. Food represents the gift of life. Westerners think of food in a far more functional and personal ways to satisfy hunger, lose weight, or satisfy cravings. Lunch interrupts our busy schedules, and lounging around the table for hours just drinking tea is seen as a waste of time as opposed of building friends and building relationships. So, okay. Who wants to tackle this? My first question is, when did we go from that honor shame culture to this guilt, this selfish, pretty isolatory guilt culture? So, Teresa, you want to go first?
Started with the Council of Nicaea back in 310 AD.
There you go. She has an exact date. No,
Well, the Council of Nicaea was what determined the singularity or the monotheism of God for the Universal Church, which is now known as the Catholic Church. And that was Constantine and the Nicene Council that started that. And that was when you see a lot of the guilt culture coming into play and spreading.
So what are your opinions on both? I mean, like,
well, I was raised in a Christian guilt culture. So without bashing Christianity, because Christianity is good for those that truly live by it, or they need it for their peace, and I would never take that from them. But I found a lack of accountability, personal integrity, and a lot of hiding and manipulation within guilt society. There's just not a lot of accountability. Now, for me, I don't want my name run through the muck. And I do everything in the world to keep my name in good standing. with some pretty tough people. So I prefer, my personal preference is shame culture. I'm not very good at being the person that shames people, because I'll give them every chance in the world to not go through that. But as heathens, we believe in Utgard. We believe in ostracism. We believe in personal accountability for your actions or deeds. There's a book out there called We Are Our Deeds. And I think it should be a prerequisite for heathenry, period, because it gives people the all of the historical background on that, on actual Norse beliefs. Excuse me, my phone's acting up. And it gives you a historical perspective in that book, as well as a ethical perspective that is very different from the guilt culture of Christianity. And we don't have a big hero God to run and hide behind if we do something wrong. I mean, if you say you're sorry in heathenry, you've still got wear-guilt to pay. Somebody may accept your apology, but you've still got wear-guilt to pay. It doesn't just go away. So I like that aspect of it, and I like personally holding myself accountable to a set of morals that I deem to be accurate and not following the rules of other people who decide what's right and wrong for me.
Or a foreign god.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I really love your terminology for that one.
Which one? The zombie on a stick?
Zombie Jew on a stick. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I love
sorry.
that.
Sorry.
No, I love that because honestly, number one, we're in
I
a
actually like Jesus. Don't
completely
get me
different
wrong.
time. No, I hear you. I absolutely love a lot of the teachings and a lot of the parables and different things like that. But I love that the concept. I mean, well, I look at the concept of Christianity in that day, and they didn't bring anything new to the table. They just called it different shit. And then they took over all of our holidays and celebrations and called them what they wanted them and made them fit their mold.
Well,
And
it made conversion easier is why.
oh,
That
I
was why.
understand why they did it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But we live in a different time, and the closer we are to the earth, which is the old way, the more grounded and stable we are. And I don't think you ever have groundedness and stability in a guilt culture.
No, you're right. Okay. All right. Amanda, your turn, girlfriend. What is your views on this?
So I agree with Teresa. I just have a few things to add as going along with the guilt culture. The guilt culture, it doesn't sit well with me. And there was a point where I figured out why, and it all boiled down to a man that was cheating on his wife, and all he had to do was pray, and God forgave him. And so when God forgave him, his wife didn't work for her. Like that wasn't good enough, and it shouldn't have been. And that's your gut talking. And so for him to go, God has forgiven me, why can't you?
Yeah.
There's no accountability. There's none. All he had to do was pray, and he thought that was okay. So in that sense, when you have that sort of leeway and that sort of unaccountability,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a church full of
Sinners.
yeah, sinners, because it's so easy for them to just ask for forgiveness, and then everybody has to play along with that, even though in reality and in human culture, for the most part, for a long time, you had to, you had to make up for that. He should have had to make up for that. And that goes with most Christianity. Guilt culture, you know, but with shame culture, you know exactly where you stand. You know exactly where you stand, and you make it better. And then, then you can move on. Everybody can move on, and everybody feels like it justice is served, basically. Like
Right.
everybody feels okay about moving forward. In the story I just told, he felt fine moving forward, and she didn't. And that's the thing, is there's got to be like both parties need to be
There was
appeased.
no air guilt paid, basically.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
That's about all.
I wish Alasia was here. I can't remember what she had to say the other night.
She is here. She's here.
Is she?
Yeah.
Where you at, Alasia? Does she have her notebook?
I'm here.
Okay, you got your notebook? You wrote notes. You said something the other night. Remember about this? You wrote it down.
Yeah, I don't have my notebook right now, but I remember I was talking about small towns versus cities, where
Right.
in the city you don't have a lot of people around you to keep you accountable, and you can really take advantage of that guilt culture. But when you live in a small town and everybody knows your business, it really does resemble a shame culture, especially when everybody talks about everybody, and you can't go to the grocery store without having people know what you've done last week or what you did at the bar or blah blah blah. And so when you live in a smaller town, you really do kind of, whether you choose to or not, live in a shame culture, and it's almost forces you to act better, because that the school and the store and everybody else is going to know what you did. And so,
And if you wear the same clothes the next day, they're going to know your butt didn't go home the night before.
yeah,
They know.
definitely.
That's right.
And yeah, it really does keep you accountable versus not having anyone know what you're up to.
I think so too.
Depending on what kind of person you are, it definitely has its advantages and disadvantages.
So what would you say would be a disadvantage?
Everyone knows your business. If you screw up, you may not be invited to a few barbecues.
Yeah, you might not be. Yeah, that might not.
Right. And especially in a small town, losing your
name.
Losing your core people, can be detrimental.
Well, look at it. Like our ancestors, you lose your core people, you're going to die. You're going to be out in the wilderness and you're going to die. That was just fact. I mean, I don't care how big and bad half these guys walk around want to be Vikings, think they are, send you loose in the Norwegian wilderness somewhere by yourself. Dude, you are not going to make it. I'm trying to tell you now. That's what's going to happen. And so you had to, and then if your whole family got ostracized because of something you did, and they would do that, you have to think, everything I do is going to affect all these people around me.
Right. It just reminds me of that saying that actions speak louder than words. You actually have to show that you are worthy or that you are capable.
What is the biggest phrase we say? Deeds, not words. That's right. Miss Devin, did you have any questions, comments, or did y'all want to say anything?
Yeah, so okay, let's see how well I can get this out. There was a part where you were talking about the shame guilt versus the guilt culture. The guilt culture is, in a Christian sense, you said the sense of the divine eye, something always watching over you. So whenever you said that, the first word that came to my mind was character. And the phrase that I think of when you say that is, character is the actions that you do when nobody is looking.
Right.
So, and I was trying to relate that to the shame culture versus the guilt culture sense. And in a Christian aspect, it's almost like it was a hope that this would develop a good sense of character in people, whereas it kind of contradicted itself and it gave people that availability to not be accountable for their actions. And then that kind of led me into the thought of like Christians try and repent for their sins. So my question then would be in the shame culture, guilt culture, heathenry aspect, is there a such thing as repenting, or is it just you are accountable, you feel the shame, you are self-accountable, self-reliable, and then what's after that? I mean,
We call it pain, wear, guilt. Teresa, you want to answer that?
So, yeah, like Donna said, we call it paying guilt, and that's treating adults like a figuring out what you need to make up for whatever slight you may have caused. Back in the back before Christianity, insulting someone's intelligence, just for example, if and I can do this because I'm using it.
You're breaking up a little
You're
bit.
freezing.
If I was to call stupid, let's
You're
say,
freezing, girlfriend. There you go.
can you hear
Stop
me?
back.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dawn and I are friends from way back, so I can say this and I know I'm not going to offend her because she knows that I don't mean it. But if I was to call Donna stupid back in the old Norse days, that would be a slight worthy of death. She or her family member, their wear guilt that I would have to pay would be my life. Hopefully I would do it without screaming and die a valiant death and blah, blah. But so, the terms and conditions of wear guilt have changed over the years. But what in a relationship, in a relationship where you're allowing somebody in your space, they need to be worthy of that value in your life. And if they're being dramatic and causing destruction, then there's got to be wear guilt paid in order for them to remain there. Otherwise, you're going to send them out to the outer fence or Utgard. And so there may or not be an ability for them to be forgiven using Christian terms, because we don't have to. And there's no guilt in it, and there's no shame in it. If somebody, excuse my French, if they were recording, so if they screw up really bad and you decide that you no longer want that in your life, oh my gosh, I have two little girls screaming, playing hide and seek. If you decide you no longer want that in your life, you're not at all obligated to forgive someone. Now, I will tell you this, from my own personal experience, there are people that I have forgiven for my own personal peace of mind. And that's because I refuse to drink poison to try to kill someone else. I'm not going to carry around that kind of bitterness. But they don't know I've forgiven them. They don't need to know. And they don't need to pay me any wear guilt because they're never getting back in my life. Fair?
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, there is, as far as repenting, no, there's not. And I understand you're saying about character. That's true. What are you doing when people aren't looking? But here's the thing: our belief.
Your character is the thing is when you when you go and you meet and your ancestors have to speak for you, that's what they're going to be talking on, is your character.
Right.
So you deal with that in your own way. But like we said, actions speak louder than words. Like, so what you do on your own is going to be what of weird you're building for your family, for your future family. First of all, because that's a big thing, is your deeds now are going to affect your children and every one of your future and everyone from here on out. And when you go and you meet your ancestors, you have to be accountable for that and you have to be able to look them in the face. So that's where your character comes into play. And we don't need, God looking at us all the time. We just need to keep in mind that that's going to affect our relationships. And, and a big thing is you want your family members in the future to look back and be like, you want to be revered and remembered. Well, you can be remembered and not revered, and you can be, oh yeah, that ancestor was a real piece of shit,
Right.
Or you can have character and that's where what it comes down to.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's your weird. Everything you do, no matter if it's seen or not seen, everything you do, like we talked about the well of weird and the tree and the drops, and you talk about in the Hellveger actually, and it's true. Everything you do is like a drop in that well. So if you're adding poison at well, that's what's coming up through your roots, and that's what's creating, you're dealing with, and that's going to show. And then we talk about your Hemingja, which is like family. I want to say luck. It's really not luck, but it's, everything you do, real simple. You did it one time, you've heard those phrases, like you live in a town and there's like a family of say 3 boys that are always in trouble, or one of them at least is always in trouble. And like, oh man, there's those Smith boys. They're such pieces of shit. Probably because one of them did something really bad, but they're going to taint the whole family name. They're just a bad family now. And that's a realistic thing that happens. But spiritually, we believe that when you do that to your family, that affects generations to come. Whatever bad, weird you building on yourself now is going to affect that little baby you were holding, and that baby's baby they're holding, and forever. So that's where that comes in. Doesn't need the gods, in my opinion, are not sitting there all the time watching everything we do, because they just like, you know what, you want to fuck it up, you're gonna fuck it up.
Yeah.
It's up to you to get your shit straight, because they're just as accountable as we are. And that's another part. So that's where that comes into play. Yeah, and I get that, but yeah, that's what that is, because you will answer for it. I mean, to your ancestors, or God forbid my grandkid learns hoodoo like I do and brings me back in dead form to berate me for something I did. I don't want that. So, where am I at? Lissa? Comment?
Hello.
Hi.
So I mean, I honestly agree with pretty much everybody. Everyone was pretty spot on with the difference between the guilt and the shame. I personally really appreciate more of the shame culture, just for the fact of, like what Amanda and Mom and Alasia said, is you know exactly where you stand. And again, with the fact of the guilt thing, it doesn't ride well with me, because again, going back to what Amanda said, there is no reason in this world that a man should be able to cheat on his wife and then be like, oh well, I prayed about it, and so God forgave me, but you can't. Or let's go into a more serious case. A man beats the crap out of his wife and goes back to church, tells everybody, and they're like, okay, well, you need to pray about this and all will be forgiven. There is no reason that should ever be okay. 100% should be shamed very, very badly, if not totally tossed out of everything.
I will say one thing real quick, and playing devil's advocate here, which is probably bad terminology. But when it comes to repentance and when people, it's not that you can just go say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and it's all forgiven. It's really not it. In my own personal belief, and look, if you're not, you can say you're sorry, you can ask for forgiveness. You keep doing the same dumb shit over and over again, you're really not. So you've actually got to change the behavior too. That is the concept in Christianity that people misunderstand. It doesn't mean that they're not saying you can come in and say, forgive me, and it's all forgiven. I know they say that a lot and you're washing the blood of Jesus, and I can go on and on about that. But no, really simply, if you actually read the words that were written in the Bible, most people did, that's not how it works. You actually have to change the behavior. So they seem to think they can do that, but that's really not how it works. When they end up in their own hell down there, they're going to wonder, damn, Donna was right. But yeah, it doesn't quite work. It's not that easy. I mean, I used to joke with my uncle, who's a priest, about going to confession. Wait, is she You're muted, Teresa. You're muted. I don't know what you don't know what you said. It might have been very eloquent.
Basically, what I was going to say was where the Christians, where they have the 77, and basically that was if a man wrongs you once, you have to forgive him. Yes. What if he wrongs you 7 times? Yes. What if he wrongs you 70 times? Yes. What if he wrongs you 70 times 7? And that was a conversation that was had between the apostle and Jesus. And according to the scriptures that were handed down, the King James Version, which we don't know if that was even remotely accurate, but that's where they get in trouble, is because like this same sin can, quote unquote, sin can happen 70 times 7 and they still have to forgive them. So that's the difference between shame culture and guilt culture right there, right? Is that if I screw over one of my friends today and they decide not to be my friend tomorrow or later today, they have shown a lack of forgiveness. And that's okay in heathenry.
Right.
Because then they're going to go and shame me for whatever the hell I did, right? And even if and the best way to handle a shaming situation is to be accountable for it and go, yep, did it. And
yep, I did.
In
You're right.
you can live with yourself,
Exactly.
you know.
That's exactly it. It's the way you react to it. Is you can somebody can say all these things that you've done, and you could continue to lie about it and not make up for it, but you're not going to be that person's friend anymore. Like they're more likely to forgive you and move on if you're like, shit, I fucked up, and like, I'm sorry, what can I do? Not like, oh no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. People are going to find out the truth,
And see, with our ancestors doing something like that, even trivial, or what we would deem be trivial now, maybe. Again, we say, it sounds dramatic, we say it's a matter of life and death, but it really was. Because if you were ostracized, that's one less resource you've got to help you into the winter or whatever. You want your social capital.
To think about
you want
this
those
way
relationships.
Too, is, the heathen community is so small. Like, you lose somebody, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
We don't have like a huge community. So, and that's another thing, is it's a very tight knit, small community, and chances are you're going to run into somebody in our community that knows one of us. So it's just one more step. Like
that happened in my conversation last night with my friend. It was like somebody that I knew that he knew from 20 years ago, and I'm like, dude, this world is small. You have no clue the connections I have. I mean, it is small, and word travels, and so
it happens all the time.
Huh?
It happens all the time. You and I
yeah.
had a conversation just the other day where you went, you know her.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah,
exactly. So
I've known her for years.
Does anybody have anything else they want to add? And otherwise, I'll move on to the Voluspa again a little bit before we close. Anybody? No. Okay, going once.
Okay, wait, hold on. I wanted to say one thing or ask
Yes.
one thing. Teresa, you had mentioned one thing you had just said the last time you spoke about the lack of forgiveness being okay. So are you saying that like up to a certain point it's okay for that person, like you were saying, not to drink that poison, so that lack of forgiveness isn't something to feel shameful about or feel guilty about? How do you relate that to like the shame guilt part of the lack of forgiveness in a person's wrongdoings?
Well, I think that we've all in this day and age, I think we've all been raised in a theoretically Christian culture.
Right.
And so a lot of us have been raised in the guilt culture just by association. And so with that comes a lot of the guilt for, so if I don't forgive someone, I can be affected just because I've been around that culture. I can be affected by feeling like maybe I'm a bad person if I don't forgive.
Yeah.
And because societally, it has become a cultural norm because we live in a Christian culture.
Right.
To feel like that we have to forgive and forget, and those are, you know, if that's what a person feels like they need to do in the situation, who am I to say any different? But I will tell you that there are people in my life that that I've forgiven for my own mental health, but they'll never know it. And my daughter's looking at me because she knows what I'm talking about. But seriously, they'll never know it because the forgiveness that I gave is not for them, it's for me. It was to purge myself of the poison of carrying around bitterness. And so, I think in our culture today, because we are guilt by association, there is sometimes guilt associated with the lack of forgiveness. And we don't have to feel guilty for it. There's no
No,
reason to feel guilty.
not
for it.
in our path. No, we
Yeah.
don't have to. Yeah. But sometimes choosing to sometimes, even though it is not required and it's not something as heathens you have to do, or you should even feel like you need to or whatever. Sometimes though, and we have to look at this, like life is different now than what it was then. Sometimes if depending on the situation, it may be better to do that for the overall whole than to hold on to it. I mean, you got to look at each situation differently. If you don't, though, there is nothing that you should feel bad about if you don't forgive somebody. However, sometimes personally you choose to. Like, I get that. The feeling of there is maybe 2 people walking this earth right now that I can't let go of some things for. And it does hold me. It's like having a cancer in there. It is, but it won't go away till I either kill them by my own hand or God's willing, someone hit them with a car. But you know, honestly, I mean that's just the honest truth. And so, but
And I think everybody has those people or those
yes,
situations, Donna. But it's okay to let that bitterness go and just, I think that I learned a phrase back when I was young that is like really important right here, and that is the opposite of love is not hate or bitterness. The opposite of love is indifference.
right,
And so, in my opinion, and it's my opinion, but when you get to the point where you can let it go, whatever it is that has wronged you, or that that resentment or whatever, then you go from bitterness to you just don't care anymore. You're indifferent, and there are literally only 5 people on this planet that will always have my forgiveness. Now, you have to include the grandchildren, I guess. So I guess there's 9, and they will always have my forgiveness. They will always be given a million chances, and that's just because they're my children and grandchildren. Aside from that, nobody else has that, and should never expect that. Everybody else kind of has to earn their keep.
I agree. Okay, anybody else before I move on to the Ballesta and we wrap up because it's almost at an hour now. Okay, let me see.